We came up with the idea actually in 2012, but we didn't think there was a market for anything like this. We thought that entrepreneurship is only inventing an app or a website or something, especially for people in our generation.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex Dobson and welcome to part 1 of my chat with Eric Silverberg. Eric Silverberg is a former university lecturer turned entrepreneur and public speaking coach. Let's go. Hi Eric, thank you very much for sitting down with me and taking the time to do so.
Happy to do so.
Please let us know your role and what you're currently working on right now.
I am the co-founder of Speaker Labs. We're a public speaking training company in Toronto.
Did you or your business partner Eli come up with the idea initially?
We came up with the idea actually in 2012, but we didn't think there was a market for anything like this. We thought that entrepreneurship is only inventing an app or a website or something, especially for people in our generation. So only 4 years later in 2016 did we have both the understanding that entrepreneurship can be something a little bit more traditional and the courage to actually start it.
Often you hear entrepreneurs talk about the hustle that's required to get their business off the ground. What's that hustle look like for you?
Getting the business off the ground looked like just a shit show, to be honest with you. I mean, no one knows how to be an entrepreneur until they start being an entrepreneur. I remember the first day that we were started, Eli and I met at his condo and we were like, so what do we do now? So we did things that in retrospect, were totally unnecessary. I remember we took a walk to TD Bank to open up a bank account. We didn't end up getting paid until like 4 or 5 months later. So we took those tasks that were just doing anything. And I think what we found out through the process was that doing anything is better than doing nothing. So it didn't really matter in retrospect that we were doing the wrong things at the beginning. I'm happy we were doing anything at all because those actions combined lead to some of the right things, and that's sort of where we're at.
It sounds like essentially as long as you put a step forward, it's a step in the right direction because you're doing something towards achieving your goal.
I think that that's mostly right, or at least the step in the wrong direction, and then you find out.
You find out, yeah, and then you have to change course and correct. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
How long did it take from the point that you initially started the company, like you mentioned, to someone actually booking your first workshop?
We started in August 2016, and our first workshop was November 2016. Okay. So we spent the first, I guess, 3-4 months basically locked in a room building the branding and building the curriculum of our program. We didn't even start trying to sell until October or November. And then our first customer, Uberflip, took a flyer on us in November 2016. So about 4 or 5 months later, we got our first customer and our first paycheck.
Okay, I mean, that's pretty good compared to a lot of startups where you hear them not getting paid for a year or more.
Yeah, I mean, it was by design. I think one perspective on entrepreneurship is build a product and see if they'll buy it. The other is first have a buyer and then build whatever they paid you to buy. We went with the former, and I think, yeah, we built the product first, and I think that was probably in retrospect the right way to go.
Right, potentially also more risky because you could have built a product that someone might have not wanted to buy.
Absolutely right. We could have built a product that was a complete failure, and then that would have been the case, yes.
Now, as someone that's regularly pitching prospective clients for business, you must have encountered your fair share of rejection.
Yes.
How do you deal with rejection?
Carefully.
What does that mean?
I'm just kidding. I deal with rejection, I would say, pretty well. The problem with rejection, I think, for most people is expectations.
In what sense?
If you look at even the best salespeople in the world, if you look at the data, they get a lot of no's, and that's the best salespeople in the world. So understanding that makes me pretty comfortable with the no's. I don't expect to close every deal, so why should I be upset when I don't?
I think a lot of people feel like an ensuing self-doubt when they're rejected, be it in business, in life, etc. I'm sure you must feel like that at some points. How do you, I guess, get out of that? What do you tell yourself to get over it? Is it just that failure is okay and a no is okay, it's on my route to getting a yes, or is there some other mental trick that you play?
It's a couple things. It's the support of my business partner, Eli. It's the yes, failure is okay, but not just knowing that, but really feeling it. It's hard to internalize it. And then the other thing, which is a little bit controversial, is a little bit of nihilism, which is basically the perspective that nothing matters. It's very nice to sometimes look at yourself in the scale of space and time and realize that your problem isn't really as big as you feel it is.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. I guess that and doing that kind of minimizes the problem in itself, and just there's other bigger things to look for.
That's exactly right.
What's been the most challenging thing or experience in getting Speaker Labs to where it is today?
Blowing people's minds. We don't want to be your average public speaking training company. We want the experience in our program to be amazing for everyone, every time. And that requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of being on all the time, because in some way, Eli and I are the product. We're the ones teaching people the course.
Yeah.
So it's not just our curriculum, but it's our delivery of the curriculum. So being on all the time is something that I love, but is also challenging at times.
Because I guess it's part of your energy, but it's also what you're teaching, so the course content, the participant materials,
right,
and just the overall atmosphere and experience.
Right. Exactly, yeah.
Now, entrepreneurship is often a roller coaster of ups and downs. What's the lowest you felt on your journey to date? Paint us a picture of that moment.
I would say there are a couple things. Number one, the low was before we even started, was Eli and I, my co-founder is Eli. Eli and I both always wanted to be entrepreneurs, and so we felt like we were underachieving for all those years that we weren't yet doing anything about it. The other thing is just sort of a consistent low, and I think it's probably something that a lot of people feel when they launch a business, which is a combination of we're happy with where we are, and we're always down on ourselves for not being even further and doing more and being further along. I mean, there's so many projects on the docket, and it sucks that we haven't completed them faster. So I don't know that there's been like a, oh my God, everything is crashing and burning and we're failing moment in particular. It's more just sort of this ever-present feeling of combined happiness and we aren't doing enough.
What do you tell yourself when you have this ever-present feeling of we're not doing enough and we could be doing more? What do you tell yourself to, I guess, push yourself and persevere?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do much about it. I think it's a pretty good balance. Always feeling like you're happy with where you're at and you're also unhappy with where you're at. I think that's where growth comes from. So I don't consciously do so much about it. I actually think it's maybe a bit of a healthy thing.
I'm sure you've had a lot of ideas before this one. A lot of people have a lot of ideas on a recurring basis, but few actually pursue them. So what made you actually pursue this particular idea versus the hundreds you probably had before?
Couple things. Finally, the pain was strong enough in not being an entrepreneur that it exceeded my fear of starting something.
You got over the hump.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing was, finally, I figured out something that I was good at. I'm a good teacher. The tech ideas that I came up with, like I'm not a product designer. I don't know how to run a tech company, but I know I'm a good teacher. So finding that teaching company was really nice, because I got to know ahead of time that, you know, if we build a curriculum and if there is a product market fit, then at least I know I'll be able to teach people well. So that was something else too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Let's shift to your background, because we spoke about what you're doing right now, but let's focus on your background. So were you a good natural public speaker growing up?
Yes and no. I did some musical theater, very like amateur when I was growing up. And so I was pretty good at that, but that's not really public speaking. That's like a cousin of public speaking.
Yeah, because it's rehearsed, right?
Right, exactly. And you're playing a different character. You're playing yourself when you're public speaking, right?
Right.
And you can hide behind that and it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And then there were times when I was very afraid of public speaking when I went to business school, and I was the type of public speaker that wouldn't volunteer to do it, and I would hide behind my cue cards and be fairly monotone in it. And then I found sort of a moment of growth when I realized how easy public speaking is. And I know that might sound crazy to some people, but the only barrier between being a good public speaker and not being a good public speaker is mindset. If you think about what the greatest public speakers do, well, they smile, well, they walk around the room, well, they yell, and they whatever. Those are not superpowers. Anyone can do those things. The question is, are you going to or not?
After you finished university, you decided to take on a role lecturing at Western.
Yeah.
Was that chance or strategy that you went into lecturing after you did a business degree?
A little bit of both. I mean, I didn't give myself the job, so there was a little bit of chance in them choosing me. The main reason I did it, if I'm going to be really honest and transparent, is I thought being a faculty member at a university at 22 years old sounded really cool.
Right.
And I thought that I would get a lot of, admiration for accomplishing that if I somehow was able to get the job. That's me being honest. So I did it for those reasons, and then I found out I really love helping people, entertaining people, and teaching people sort of through the process.
And as a lecturer, you were teaching like packed classrooms on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Was it overwhelming at first? Like, did you fear going into the classroom and having to speak in front of so many students, or did you embrace it and were you looking forward to it?
Both. It was. I was very excited for it, but I was also fairly nervous for it. I mean, if you remember that I was 22 when I started it, my students, some of them were older than me, all of them were smarter than me. And so the biggest fear, I think, was not being able to answer a question that I should be able to answer. I knew that was going to happen. I didn't have a hunch, I knew. And so that was the thing I was most afraid of, but I was also really excited for it. And in the end, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I ended up building my entire career around it.
What about from a public speaking perspective? Was it something that you thought would be challenging, or you thought, I can do this?
I was pretty sure I was going to be energized by it.
Yeah.
I was pretty certain I was going to love it. I didn't know if I would have the energy to do it all day, every day, but in this weird sort of way, public speaking is the very thing that gives me energy. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll think to myself, man, I don't feel like going in there. I'm tired. I want to sleep for another hour. And then after speaking for an hour, now I just want to keep going and I'm energized by it. So that's pretty nice that the thing I do is the thing that gives me my energy.
And after you finished your role lecturing at Western, you took on a few other roles, including in operations management and marketing at various tech startups. Mm-hmm. What made you want to leave behind the lecturing world and go into like a corporate tech job?
I thought it was my duty as a millennial to work at a tech company. I mean, everyone's doing it. It's the cool thing to do, so I did it. And the other thing was, as much as I loved teaching, I didn't love the working for an academic institution part of it. You're told what to teach. You know what your career trajectory looks like. There are constraints around you that you can't play with when you teach in an academic institution as opposed to teaching for yourself for a company that you built.
Like the curriculum, for example.
Yeah, the curriculum, even things like the pay and the room for growth. The very best case scenario was I became a tenured professor and I was going to make a certain amount of money, and it was definitely not going to be that other amount of money that I might have wanted. So there are these constraints that I didn't like. I wanted there to be a little bit more variety and unknown, and potential for more success. Granted, a potential for more failure too.
Yeah, of course.
But I found that a little more exciting.
You also did an MBA after you finished lecturing at Western, correct?
Sure did.
What's the most useful thing that you learned from your MBA?
To be honest, I didn't learn too much about business doing my MBA that I didn't already learn from learning business already and teaching business already, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. The only course that I didn't understand anything about going in and then came out with a better understanding was my economics course. But the other stuff I think I already sort of knew, but it was more about bringing it back to the forefront of my consciousness rather than stored away wherever it used to be, I think was the main thing.
If you could redo your career, would you start Speaker Labs earlier? Why or why not?
I asked myself that question a lot, actually. On one hand, yes, I would, because I didn't really develop any new skills I didn't really develop any new skills working in tech that apply directly to what I'm doing at Speaker Labs. But I made a lot of connections in the tech world that became Speaker Labs customers.
Okay.
So on one hand, I don't know if we would have had the same success if we didn't expand our networks. The only reason that we got that first deal at Uberflip was because we made a connection with one of our colleagues at Influitive, who then went on to work at Uberflip. So I don't know if we ever would have had as much success getting customers unless we made those connections. And I don't know that we would have understood the language of business for a lot of our customers that we're able to apply in our curriculum now.
Like the practical language.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what a BDR was before I worked in tech, and now we're training a lot of BDRs.
What is a BDR?
It's a business development relationship manager, or I mean, it's someone who works in sales.
It's a role.
Right? It's a role in sales, right? So I didn't even know what any of these things meant. I didn't know if a BDR was like someone who worked in a kitchen or someone who worked in sales, right? So understanding the language helped.
Yeah.
That language somehow you don't really get when you're in business school. You only get when you're working. So that certainly helped, and I was able to apply that, and making the connections certainly helped. So on those fronts, I'm glad I started when I did. But on the other hand, the only reason I didn't start it earlier was because of fear.
That's very.
I was scared of failing. That's why I didn't do it before. And fear sucks. So on that hand, maybe I wish I started earlier.
It sounds like in business school you learned all the theories, and then while you were working at the tech startups, you got like the pragmatic everyday knowledge of like what does a particular role mean and do, so that you can actually communicate with those roles, those people that come through your program now effectively, and connect with them and actually understand the challenges they may face and how you can help them. Which is quite powerful actually, because that's how you can connect with people. Yeah,
totally. And it makes your students feel like this isn't a one size fits all thing, but you're actually applying this to my life and my job and what's relevant for me. We were willing to fail. Eli and I gave ourselves a 1-year runway. We committed. We are going to go at this for 1 year. And if we fail, then our hunch is that 1 year learning will at least have been worth it.
Yeah.
So we were completely willing to fail. And